Welcome to Talking Tax Smart with retired Revenue Officer McGarry. Today, we want to continue our discussion as we discussed during the last episode in regard to the makeup of the Internal Revenue Service. And you might recall that we talked basically about the four operating divisions that were put in place by a businessman, Charles Rosati, when he was the commissioner of the Internal Revenue Service. Of course, those groups that we're talking about are large business and international, small business and self-employed, wage and investment, and the tax-exempt and government entities. So these were the divisions that were set up. And what we want to talk about today and look more in depth at is those individuals within the Internal Revenue Service that you would come into contact with as a member of the general public. So it is true that, for example, if you were a large business, you would deal with, for example, a revenue agent who would be assigned to come in and to look at issues that might come up from returns that you had filed. Or if you were living overseas, then it is possible that you could be contacted by the Internal Revenue and looking at the issue of, had you filed your returns? Did you owe money? Those types of issues. But the general public is going to deal with two divisions of the Internal Revenue Service that that deal with the general public. And one of those, of course, which would make sense, would be wage and hour. Wage and hour is set up to deal with the general issues surrounding individuals filing their income tax returns. And so in wage and hour, you're going to find basically three people that you would come in contact with in customer service. And in customer service, you're going to have what's called a contact representative, and then you're going to have a tax payer specialist that deals with complex types of things. And these individuals, so if you make a phone call to the Internal Revenue Service because you have questions about what tax law has to say about the taxability of something like, for example, like Social Security, or the taxability of an insurance premium that you may have received, you're going to talk to somebody who is trained to deal with that particular thing. Now, how they do that currently is that people are trained to go on a gate, and there you're transferred to somebody who has been trained in the subject, but is also trained in how to use a computer screen that prompts them to ask the questions that are necessary to ask. So you might remember that I said that, when it comes to working with tax law, nothing is very simple and cut and dry. There are a few things which are cut and dry that just can require a simple answer. But most things, there are contingencies to the answer that you would receive. So there are lots of questions that have to be asked. Over the years, it's been in the making for more than 20 years. The Internal Revenue Service, in a desire to have quality presented to the general public in questions that might be asked of them, has gone through a process whereby people who are trained to ask specific questions have a computer system that they go through that helps them to ask the necessary questions so that they can move forward in making sure that they give the general public the correct answer. Now, in the old days, it was just based upon the skill of the person who was on the phone and who was answering questions. And so, we would look things up, and I would have to be skilled in the area and look up in the publication and take the taxpayer to the publication, and we'd go through it together. And so it was really dependent upon my ability to know the subject and to ask the necessary questions. Much of that has been taken away, and now the computer helps people to be able to say, what question should I ask next, or what box should I check? Then based upon the answer that is given by the taxpayer, the computer will then move them forward in the process to come to the correct answer. That is a process whereby the customer service representative is trying to get you the most correct answer according to what tax law allows. So it's a fairly complex job. It's a job that requires great communication skills. It requires your ability to be able to understand how to work the computer system. It requires the ability to be able to know the direction that you want to take a conversation, since very few people call in and ask simple questions that you can just get the answer out of them. But it takes, as I said, it takes some really good communication skills. If you pull up on the screen and you ask a question and the taxpayer doesn't understand the question and or doesn't give you the answer that the computer is looking for, your ability to rephrase the question or to guide them, as it were, into how to answer the question is essential to you being able to be productive in this area. So that's one aspect of customer service. If you get a question that is highly technical, then that normally is written up, and people may call you back on that. Over the last couple of years, there have been instances where the Internal Revenue has simply said, we don't ask those type of we don't answer those type of highly technical questions. And so you would be referred to the private sector to get an answer. And I know that frustrated a lot of people, but you have to spend according to your resources. And as the resources begin to dwindle, with attrition, with Congress lessening the amount of money which was available to the Internal Revenue, there was simply not staffing available to answer certain highly technical questions. And so they referred to saying to people that, we just don't do those types of questions anymore. You'll have to go to the private sector. That said, the regular customer service representative is going to answer the standardized questions. Highly technical issues would then go to a tax technician or a taxpayer specialist, who would then go in and they would be the ones to address these difficult types of questions. That's the first aspect of looking at what customer service does. Now, customer service also handles accounts. So if you called in and you had an account question, then you would be directed to somebody who is skilled in accounts, and they would be the one to go through, and they would be the one to help you go through that process. Now, there's a number of aspects of how accounts works, and how we get into doing things in accounts. So a couple of caveats here. I would like to do maybe a podcast where I'm dealing just with the issue of security. But let me just say briefly in passing that it normally takes somebody about 2.5 to 3 years, even after you get extensive training on how to get into our computer system and how to use the system for security purposes. You just can't. Let me put it this way. You'll often hear programs talk about the fact that the media or a movie or something like that, where they'd be bragging about, we broke into the IRS computer system and we were able to see this. The flat out answer to that is no. No, that's a lie. That's an embellishment. You don't break into the Internal Revenue Service system. There are a number of safeguards that are in place to get into IDRS, and those things are tracked locally as well as nationally. They have people that every keystroke that a IRS assister who is assigned to accounts makes is logged in on the computer. Excuse me, and they know everything that's going on in regard to that computer. But the second aspect of that is that everything on an account is in code. So in order for you to be able, even let's just say hypothetically that you were able to, you had some genius mastermind, computer nerd who loves to hack government systems, and so he hacks and he breaks in to the IRS computers. He, you, everything is in code. The commands are all in codes. The how the return is processed on the account is all in code. And part of what an assister is learning when they go through these codes is they're learning how to read the code and understand the story. When I used to teach people how to work IRS, one of the things that we talked about was that, every account has a story. First of all, the records for the IRS are cumulative, meaning that there are multiple records that are available under one person, for example, for how long you've been filing your tax return. That information may be available on the computer for some time, but every period is individual to itself. So that means that you're going to pull up a specific period, you're going to read a story, basically. And so when somebody calls in and they say they have a problem, you can see when they filed their return, whether it was on time or not. You can see whether or not something was done correctly or not. You can see whether adjustments were made, penalty and interest were charged. All of those types of things that exist on that account, but it's all in code. And you can't read the code unless you're using a document which is available to the taxpayer assistant who is helping you. This is called a document 6209. And the 6209 is a thick book that divides everything into the codes in the various sections. So when somebody says that they broke in and they understand exactly what was going down and they were able to take care of that and read that code, they're lying to you. That it doesn't happen. So it takes a long time to become proficient at reading IDS codes. It takes a long time to be able to understand the story that's being told. And then customer service has the ability to be able to go in, and those who are more senior and have been given clearance have the ability to go in and to adjust accounts on the spot. And so there are codes that you have to do in order to be able to know how to do that as well. So in customer service, I would say that customer service is kind of in my opinion, kind of the backbone of direct contact with individuals coming to the IRS for help. And, when you talk about, and we're going to talk about different divisions, we're going to talk about different jobs with the divisions of the IRS. And, it's human nature that people are proud of what they do, and that there's a little bit of smugness that goes on with individuals that may be crossed from one job to another job. And that smugness exists clearly within the Internal Revenue Service as well. When I crossed over into Collection Division had this attitude, because I crossed over right after we had this big to-do with Congress, and there were new rules that were put on the Internal Revenue Service as to how it is they had to function, and the safeguards that were put in place to guard taxpayers from abuses which were perceived by the public in regard to the IRS. Remember, I said, last time we talked in passing, that at one point the revenue officer of the Internal Revenue and Collection Division was probably the most powerful law enforcement officer in the United States, because they could take actions which could devastate your life without any due process. So Congress stepped in to curb that, but there never was training provided to revenue officers into how to deal with the tax law aspects of when people file tax returns. So we're going to go into in another video. We're going to go into the publication 1, And the publication is a direct result of this thing that took place in Congress. And so every time that you get a notice from the Internal Revenue Service, you're going to get a publication one. And one of the first things it says is, do you agree with the assessment of the Internal Revenue Service in regard to your accounts? And if somebody disagrees with that, then you're obligated by law. Remember, you are a law enforcement officer. As a collection individual, you're obligated by law to then go back and look at the issue that they have with the tax return they filed. So I come from a unique position because I work those highly technical cases as a customer service individual. But when I came into collection and became a revenue officer, there was a little bit of tension that existed between myself and my manager, because my manager, would say to me, because I didn't do things. I was looking at accounts and issues that people were having, and putting forward the fact that there were adjustments that were needed to be made on people's accounts before we could collect against them. And my manager would talk to me and say, McGarry, you're not in customer service now. You're in collection. And so then we would have a discussion where I would remind him that we're not operating under old school rules where you just go out and collect and do whatever you want. But there are rules in place that we have to follow because we are law enforcement officers. And so he'd have to capitulate to my argument, but he wasn't happy about it. I come from the unique perspective that I think the training that we get in customer service, the functions that are there, are an important aspect of the contact that the Internal Revenue Service has with the public. So you have customer service representatives who can help you with technical questions. You have customer service people who can help you with accounts questions. They can adjust accounts as they are allowed to. And they can, and normally that's going to deal with, for example, penalties and things of that nature that might be there under reasonable cause criteria. And excuse me. And then they can send your case, if it meets criteria, to various places like problem resolution, where a taxpayer advocate can look at it if the rules fall in place that they're allowed to do that. The other thing that they can do is they can set you up on installment agreements. You don't have to go to the automated collection system, ACS, which specifically deals with wage and hour type of collection issues. But if you have somebody online, they owe money, you can set them up in an installment agreement if they meet the right criteria. So the customer service representative in customer service is a really important frontline function. And the IRS has bent over backwards to try to make sure that the information that you get is accurate. So there are local and national standards set for how it is that the quality of the service that you're getting. So what will happen is that there will be random individuals that call and make test calls on a national level, and then on a local level there's also somebody in quality assurance that does the same thing and judges how well you've answered the question and if you are accurate. And that could affect your performance rating if you haven't done things the way that you're supposed to. So this is a lot of information to process. I understand that. As I said before, it's not exceptionally sexy, but we're going to take at this point and save for our next video talking about small business self-employed. But these provisions are set up for you so that you might be able to have an experience with the Internal Revenue Service, which is good. So a couple of things that I will say in closing. Remember, if somebody says that they broke into the IRS computers, no, they didn't. They're lying to you. If somebody says that, the information that they got from the Internal Revenue Service was not accurate, that's likely not accurate as well. They may not like the answer that they received, but not only do you have the customer service individual who's been trained on how to deal with these questions, and there are safeguards in place so the information is accurate, but there are also publications available to you. So if we were dealing with the subject and you weren't really sure about the subject and you wanted more information, part of the way that I would close our call is by making sure that I've made myself clear on what your question is, giving you the answer that you need, and then I would send you a physical copy of the publication. Or if you're not big into print, then I would, send you over to the right publication so that you could look it up on the IRS website at irs.gov. That being said, next time we talk, we'll talk a little bit about small business self-employed and specifically look at the function of the revenue officer and what that individual does inside of the Internal Revenue Service. Until then, if you find this interesting, if you like it, please like, and it'd be a good deal if you subscribe as well, so that you could see when things come out and things are new. And remember that the basic policy of the Internal Revenue Service is for the United States government: if you're going to play, you got to pay. It's Revenue Officer McGarry out.